Be the early bird to catch the worm, or in this case, exclusive Kickstarter early bird specials. We're wrapping up a delectable package for those who scamper in the first during our initial 48 hours. Want to be in the know? Dash over to our Kickstarter notification page and sign yourself up to be the first to know when the gates of the zoo fling wide open for backers just like you. I'm Nerdarchy Ted.
And I'm Nerdarchy Dave.
Welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds. So today it's there and back again, a YouTuber's tale about travel.
On podcast number 2, thanks for joining us. With that, what is our first topic for today?
So making your D&D world more real with random roll charts.
All right, so we want to talk about how random roll charts can really tie into travel and movement throughout the worlds of Dungeons and Dragons. Also, I guess you could use this for other RPGs as well.
Absolutely. So the concept of, random roll charts, there's so many things that have already been determined or already been preset with random roll charts that you have the ability to use these. If you don't feel like coming up with, or if you want the hazards of, things could change at a moment's notice, you can just have these charts ready to go and roll on them when you feel the need to arise. And heck, I've been out for a walk and all of a sudden the weather just instantly changes. You hear a crackle of thunder, lightning appears in the distance, and the sky opens up. It was bright and sunny 5 minutes ago, and now you're soaking wet. If it can happen in the real world, it absolutely can happen in a role-playing game.
Yeah, and it also kind of can change some things and affect things in your game. If you decide to use random roll charts for weather, like you kind of suggested, how would that affect, the game, right? Well, a torrential downpour means lack of visibility. You're not going to see nearly as far. If you couple that with some kind of random encounter or planned encounter, right? Like maybe you decide to do your weather randomly, but you also have some planned encounters for over the road and travel, and you're like, oh, you know what? That torrential downpour would make perfect sense for Monster X because they have the ability to control weather, or they like this kind of weather, as the case may be. Like off the top of my head, Krakens have weather control. That'd be one hell of a random encounter, but in some old school D&D, that might happen.
Absolutely. And, most adverse weather effects are going to slow down travel. So if you're looking to impede them, whether the random weather is being affected by the actual weather or whether it's, another force acting upon it to specifically slow them down, it's something that, the parties, whatever their mission is, could be delayed by this weather and, whatever force is acting to make that happen.
Now, the DMG is full of all kinds of random charts and tables, and there's also books you can find on Amazon and other places that's nothing but random encounters, or not random encounters, but random charts and tables. Ted, I think you own several of them.
I do indeed.
When Nerdarchy Doug was working with us, one of his favorite things was just the random stuff happens table, which is always great, which can lead to new adventures. Now, if you're also like a more of an improv GM and you're sandboxing, willing to go with whatever's going on, then this can really be fun and spring new ideas for you as the GM, and also keep you on your toes and been like, well, they were traveling from this town to this city, but now there's a flying castle. The whole adventure has changed. That might be a lot of work for the GM on the fly, but some GMs kind of thrive and love that.
Yeah, and if you look at, this variety of streamers out there, some that I specifically watch, if you're running a long protracted game, you're not running like a set story arc in X number of sessions, that, things can absolutely be delayed or enhanced by those random roll charts and, those weather things that are like, all right, you have no idea what things are going to be like today, and if you roll poorly, then, you could go in the wrong direction and things could get all out of whack. All right, so Dave, what is your favorite type of random roll chart?
Man, I'm kind of a sucker for a good random encounter table. I guess because I came up in first edition and second edition, and it was much more of a factor in the game. And also it can help tell part of the story about the world, where, it's not so much about this like pre-planned big arc that GM has, but like what's going on in the world. You roll on a random encounter table and you get some weird monster or creature or just event, then all of a sudden, how does this fit and interact with the rest of the world? Now we get to tell that story together with our players.
A lot of stories that I see today, like they factor in what level is the party, what kind of thing can they counter that's not going to just out and out kill them. Where I know we've played where like, all right, we're second level and a giant comes out of nowhere and just begins to stomp through everything, and we nearly have a party wipe because somebody was, stupid and decided to charge.
It's fine. You're like first level. You're ready to take on that stone giant.
I think we were too.
So, Ted, why would you say random roll charts are important?
random roll charts are so important because so often DMs are, stumped when players decide to do something that they're not quite ready for. So random roll charts are going to provide them with that something happens. The weather changes, random encounters, random loot. There are some styles that are entirely built off of random. DMs don't even have to make any choices. They let the dice decide for them. We're talking about, this kind of stuff. You can check out the Zero Prep D&D with this video above our heads.
Yeah, it goes into a whole system and website for basically clicking a button, creating random everything. We love it. All right, so we're going to go and talk about some pros and cons of, having random charts in your D&D game and how you can actually use these random events to make your D&D world seem more real.
So first off, it's going to add more choices. These charts that are out there, they've been cultivated by, professionals essentially, whether they're in a small book, a large book, or possibly even just, random things that you found online. They're going to have more people generating more ideas. Regardless of how successful you are, you can't come up with everything. So here's ideas made by somebody else.
Yeah, so we'll go down the list of pros first. So...
Sorry, yeah, that was our first pro, adding more choices.
It just adds options that maybe you wouldn't have thought of, and then you get to see how the players will interact with it. So next up is the idea that these can be quick idea generators, right? Maybe it's not so much that you're going to randomly generate everything, but maybe you're just stumped, you're bored, you've been doing the same stuff forever, and you're like, I need to break up the monogamy somehow. Monotony. That's completely different.
Break up monogamy might be something vastly different.
It's a quick idea generator, and it is awesome for building up and breaking through when you have writer's block. You can throw the dice down, see what they come up with, and now you're off and running, possibly directions you would have never thought of on your own.
Yeah, as I said before, this is a great way, and I know there are GMs out there that they just use the tools that are there, and that's how the story unfolds. And those sessions can be just as amazing as, anything that's a pre-planned adventure. And with that, it's ease of use. You don't have to make those decisions. The dice do it for you. All you need to do is find the proper charts that you want to use, and once you've essentially prepped those once, all your prep, comes with just a roll some dice.
So one of the things I had mentioned earlier, and several times, and it's going to be a recurring theme, is that it adds surprises for not just the players but the DM as well, right? So you, as the DM, never know what the players are going to do and how they're going to react to anything, but now you also get to randomly roll and see what the world's doing and how the players are going to react to that. And all of this really helps to solidify your D&D world and make it more real in the sense that nobody has full control of what's going on in the world around them, whether they're talking about D&D or the real world. So when you start getting into these random roll charts and introducing these ideas into the game, not only make ideas percolate in your brain, but also it shows that the world is moving around the players despite what they're doing.
Now another advantage in doing this, is whether you're rolling on the spot or as part of your prep. If it's a role you really don't like, you're still in control. You're still the DM. You can be like, all right, well, that one doesn't work. Let me roll something else. So you still have full control here, unless it's part of the buy-in of whatever the dice say is what you do. So that's the advantage. Another advantage of these kind of charts is you're still the DM. You still have control. It's still yours.
You get to take control of narrative direction anytime you want. What about some cons?
So the cons are up there, and it's gonna add in delays. It's gonna add in the chaos. We talked about the weather. The weather can slow things down. If there's a time crunch involved and all of a sudden there's a day delay because they've gone the wrong direction because of the winds, or the weathers have bogged them down so much that they have to go another direction, all right, the story just might not become successful because it's just not possible.
They can't make it through the pass now.
They can't make it through the pass.
And they're going to have to go through the mines of Moria.
Absolutely.
Now, again, you could have used that narratively, or you can make it a random thing that happens. So the other thing, which you're kind of hinting at a little bit too, is the idea that you're going to get the chaos of the delays, creating more work for the DM because they don't really know what's going to happen and they haven't planned for it. So now they have to think about it on the fly, and maybe now their next session going forward, in their prep, they're going to have to take into account these things that were randomly generated.
That chaos is going to make more work for you in keeping track of things. I know that I have done many times where I'm actually taking notes during the session because I feel like whatever has just happened needs to be recorded so it's not lost. Because a lot of my home games are And all of my home games are not recorded. So when I'm running, if something is said, something is done, and it needs to be there, my note taking, via hand is not as good as, typing it into the computer. So sometimes we're like, all right, talk amongst yourselves for a minute. I need to jot this idea down, or I need to make sure that this is kept so that it's now part of the ongoing story.
Now, the last bit of the chaos that can come up is the fact that you may confuse your players. They've got a quest in mind, they're doing a thing, and then when you start putting other pieces in front of them, they start trying to figure out how it relates to the thing they're already working on, because clearly the DM is just going to keep us on this one adventure the whole time.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Or the other side of that is, they don't associate it with what's going on, but they, for some reason, have fixated on it, or in their mind right now, this is more important. So if you're trying to keep them on track or on pace with a particular story and story beats, that might not happen. And it's generally not a problem in a home game, but like if you're running a convention game or shorter campaign arcs, it could definitely be an issue.
Yeah, and sometimes these random rolls could possibly utterly derail a campaign. If you're on a story arc and you need a divergence and you happen to roll some really interesting things and the players get really hooked, they might give up on whatever the main quest is to go chase the side quest. And again, if you've inserted something that's a time crunch or something that has to be done by a certain phase of the moon, it's possible that they're having so much fun with this alternate arc that they're unable to complete that first one maybe until next month or next year or next decade or whatever have you. So now it's like, all right, well, now what do we do, because we messed up this whole first arc because the second arc was more fun.
Yeah, which, I mean, as long as you're not like super married to what you're doing, it is okay to chuck that.
Sure.
And do something, interesting. And bringing it back to travel, the other thing is too, it is real easy to set up these like interesting side venues or side quests for the players that they're out on, and for them to kind of forget about what the main thing was, what they were working on, like you mentioned. So these are pitfalls that you're gonna have to remember, but it doesn't have to be a big deal if you're okay as a GM with chucking the other stuff you'd been working on, which some DMs, I know they're dead set against it, but me personally, do it all the time because I just want to do what's fun for the players.
Awesome. That's absolutely right. It's a scenario that as long as the table is having fun, it's really annoying when you as the DM put time, effort, and energy into a concept and you realize shortly thereafter, your concept isn't as bought in as much as you wanted, or some other idea comes up and the players are like, nah, I'd rather go do this other thing than do that first thing that we talked about. And, it sucks, but it's completely okay.
So that is the random table part of the travel, right? And it is a great tool. And also, to me, it's like a fun place to just throw in some random, travel stuff so your players can interact with it. The 5e Middle Earth, one of the, I think maybe it's I'm not sure which one because there's so many at this point, Middle Earth, Lord of the Rings 5e versions. But one of them has the whole section where it's all about the journey and it's like this skill challenge that you have to do. So that could be something people add in as well.
Absolutely. So sometimes when you're traveling, you're not necessarily going to be traveling on foot. Whether we're riding an animal, we're riding a boat, riding an airship, riding a hot air balloon, there's lots of different ways to travel when it comes to role-playing games.
That sounds like a perfect segue, Ted, into our next topic.
Dave, what do you think is the best thing about adding airships, boats, or spelljammers to your D&D game?
Ted, this is easy. Whatever the vessel is, it becomes another character in the story, in my opinion. Like, we played a Star Wars game, and it was basically the Millennium Falcon style ship that we kind of like retrofitted out and gave it a paint job. And like, it became a big deal for several characters in the game. Like, they're all about the ship and making sure nothing happened to it. In D&D games, I've used the boat for multiple counter scenarios, and the players loved that. They loved having the ship super involved. So, like I said, it becomes another character in the story. Ted, what is the best thing about adding a airship, spelljammer, or some kind of other vessel or vehicle into your D&D games?
The great thing about adding vehicles into your game, specifically boats, airships, that kind of stuff, is it can involve all the pillars of the game. First and foremost, if you're discovering it, it's exploration. You've got the ability to encounter, new things. You can fight off whoever was there first. You can get into lore of like, what is this vessel? How did it interact with history? Or if there are people on it, it is something that can become a social encounter as well. So it's so easy to encounter all of these things. Beyond that, it goes even further because having this vessel is going to allow you to travel to new and different locations, whether you're getting to new continents, new planets, new solar systems, whatever have you. It's just awesome from all directions.
Now, we've used different vehicles in different games that we've played, several of them. I just got back from D&D in the Castle, where I ran my Other Skies game, which uses airship. You've just finished up a campaign where we're on a sailing boat. We used to play an annual Thanksgiving Eve game where we used a Spelljammer. And we've played several other like sci-fi RPGs where there's a starship involved.
In my boat game, you guys actually ended up with a spell-jamming vessel that you were using, to kind of complete the overarching quest.
As I mentioned, like I've run Other Skies, which is an Arcana Punk setting. It's not related to, but there is definitely some inspiration from Eberron and how things are done in Eberron, which is also another Arcana Punk kind of campaign setting where you not only have airships, but you also have sailing boats that are powered by elementals. You have the lightning rail, which is basically a train. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. So it can be super important in a lot of different settings that are not necessarily like traditional D&D, but you can still go with fantasy.
And the great thing about the airships is each setting almost seems to have a unique way of how these airships tend to work. So whatever that mechanic is, there's always some way to foul it up. And once you foul up a air vessel, things can go south real quick. Yeah, you foul up a regular sailing vessel, and okay, well, you gotta get new sails, you gotta get new masts, but you're not instantly going to die unless you actually damage the ship itself. Whereas, like, if you're in the sky and you stop it from being able to be in the sky, you're going to crash, and that's going to be bad news.
Well, I would say like they both actually have different ways, right? Where they're kind of comparable, right? Like in a sense, like you can damage the hull of a ship and it'll begin sinking. Right, that's a problem. But the propulsion system doesn't matter. You're just kind of stuck, right? But it doesn't mean instant death. It could mean death eventually.
Sure.
But not instant death. Airship or Spelljammer, if you're in an atmosphere, maybe the way the magic works, a hull breach isn't going to be that detrimental. It's just you have a hole in this. You have a window you weren't expecting before. Maybe a tripping hazard, right? But you damage the propulsion system. Now you're in real danger because maybe in a spell jamming vessel, not so much. Maybe you're just drifting and it's not a big deal. But an airship, and you go from drifting to plummeting.
So you ran this Other Skies game on the channel. It was sponsored by Open Legend. Do you want to get into that campaign a little bit here?
Sure. So, Open Legend sponsored us to do a whole campaign using their system, and we threw it to the patrons, and they voted on the genre, and it was like really close between fantasy, steampunk, and eldritch horror. So we mashed them together and go, okay,
mushy.
We're going to do that. And then, so I came up with this idea that there's these 13 flying cities, and you go back and forth via airships. And there was actually, a train system that we never really got into that was kind of discussed. That might come up in latter games. But, that being said, when we introduced this component into the games, the players really bought into having their own ship and making it their own. In the Open Legend game, you guys were given a ship and, really took on, the idea of having this super cool, sleek prototype, better than anything in the air. And, your character in particular was very techie, Arcana techie. So, it was totally their jam, and they took a lot of pride in maintaining the ship. And also, the ship had NPCs on it that added more character.
So, because you had decided that you were going to run Other Skies again, both of us went and rewatched, because it's up on the channel if you want to watch, the 13 episodes that comprise this story. There's a link. We'll put it up right over here. You can come check that out. But it was really enjoyable to kind of go back to that old campaign and see the fun and the chaos of being on that boat and interacting with this world and this weird stories. But you decided you were going to run this at D&D in a castle and revisit this setting post that story. So what did that look like?
As always, when I run games at D&D in a castle, or just games in general, I like to give here's 4 options that I would like to play. Pick one. And they picked Other Skies in this particular case. And it was fun to kind of reintroduce some of the concepts from that game. They really got into not just the ship aspect of it, but even more so the crew. They had a lot of fun creating NPCs that were on their crew and coming up with different names. And they didn't come up with them all at once, but they slowly introduced them throughout the games. They had fun naming the ship. In this case, they didn't get a ship with a name already. And then later on, they even got to upgrade it. And they got to even use the cannons on the ship, which they really loved until someone used the cannons of a ship back attack on them, then they loved it a lot less. But it was a good time.
Cannons notwithstanding, what other kind of, boats, vehicles have, we kind of experimented with here?
So the early days of Nerdarchy, we played a lot more games online. There used to be a one-shot group, and we just randomly hey, I'll run a game. And I ran several Eberron-inspired games. It was like the earliest of the Unearthed Arcana had come out. Everyone was really excited about Eberron. And, we used airships in those games. We used the lightning rail in those games. In some cases, there was both. And it just gave, interesting places and encounter areas. Have an adventure, right? Escorting the Bad Luck Lady, you can probably find it online somewhere, was the idea that you guys had to take the lightning rail and protect one of the passengers and get them from point A to point B. So it almost became like the train itself, where it was all these encounter areas. And, there were fights inside the cars, there were fights on top of the lightning rail, which added, extra tension and drama, because if you were knocked off, you might take a bunch of damage, but you were definitely out of the fight.
And that's the part that I was going to get into. With each of these kinds of things, whether you're talking about a regular boat, whether you're talking about a spelljammer, whether you're talking about an airship, or, even something as, wacky as the lightning rail, there is mechanics around whatever it is that whatever you're vesseling, whatever you're driving. Because if you fall off a regular boat, you are now in water. There are rules for that. If you fall off an airship, you're now in the air. Do you have a fly speed or some way to, teleport? If not, you've got some serious problems. So you have to be aware of all of these kinds of situations, and that adds to the fun, that adds to the tactics of things. Not only do you as the player have the ability to have these things used against you, but you then can use them against your adversaries as well. So I love adding those things in because it adds a new element. There's new tactics that can be employed because you have a different environment than just we are all standing on the ground.
Well, speaking of you love the run, you ran We Love the Boat, a 12-session arc for 5e D&D.
We live on a boat. It was definitely this, fun little arc that I ran. Sadly, this one is not on the channel or anything. It's, was our home game. I kind of treated the situation of, all right, the players were just mercenaries that slowly over the course got attuned to the people on the boat and the boat itself. And of course, anytime you've got a scenario like this, what do you have to do? You've got to kill people and you've got to destroy the boat. So as the story unfolded, they had to be on water because they were escorting something that others were after. And as long as it was on open water, it couldn't be tracked. So what did I have to do? I had to ground them. I had to get them off the boat, and that created all kinds of fun and problems, and I really enjoyed that aspect because while from a narrative perspective, it's all right, well, Ted is being mean, he's trying to punish the players. I was trying to give them a cool story of what kind of problems are you going to come up with that they have to overcome, because it wasn't a scenario of just, oh, where you were going. They were essentially waiting for a sign from an NPC's god or goddess, which was out of their hands. So it was just filling time, and was really, a bit of a struggle in some regards because there was no dungeons to explore. There were no elements. It was the players interacting with themselves and interacting with the NPCs, and whatever encounters wound up coming up. So I know, when you begin to talk about travel and immersion, you can enter in some of these random effects, and we previously talked about that, but here it was more than that because it was all encompassing story, and as I kind of previously said, all right, their boat was destroyed, so now what do they do? So I always love the concept of the ship in the bottle, where they crash landed on this island. There happened to be one of these powerful casters who had these magical bottles that could literally suck things into it. So they wound up finding several of these boats, and one of them happened to look like a Kraken. So out of the Spelljammer books, there was the Kraken ship. So then once they determined that was the one that they wanted, there was a person that was on it who claimed that it was his vessel. It wasn't his. It was a haunted vessel, so there were new areas to explore. So they got to basically do a dungeon crawl in this new ship before they could wind up really getting away from it. And because it was a Spelljammer, they then got to go under the water and over the water and have a little bit more fun with their boat than what they had with all of the the previous vessels that they've been on.
This particular spelljamming vessel is totally transmedium capabilities. So that was like a fun element that was kind of getting it added into it because it kind of had a captain, quote unquote. It introduced an NPC for us to interact with, and you kind of rated some of all the other cool things that were involved. What do you think was like one of the most challenging parts for you running? We Live on a Boat.
So the biggest problem with that is the players are stuck. So if you don't have the town or random things happening to occupy their attention, they can just be like, all right, well, I'm just going to sit and wait for something. So if you didn't have prompts to play with, there was a lot of that, oh, well, what happens next? So not all players are going to be the ones reaching and grabbing. And while I thought I came up with some really interesting NPCs, they weren't ones that my players were like latching onto and trying to come up with. So I wrote a lot of backstory and subplot and whatnot for characters that never wound up getting explored because the players weren't attaching themselves to those NPCs.
Actually, it kind of like brings up like kind of a key thing and key tenet of Nerdarchy, right? Like, and that is the fact that we later had to get more crew and hire them on, and like we tended to be more vested in the new crew in some ways than we were in the old crew.
Sure.
Because in that instance, Ted had given us some agency as well of like, oh, well, what kind of people do you hire? Who do you bring on? Anytime you do that, it just seems like the players are going to care more about them and connect with them a bit deeper than if you, the GM, are like, here's a list of people and maybe some defining traits. Sometimes one or two will catch on. Like there was Birdie, the halfling lookout, that really kind of like captured us for a while, but only because Ted did something horrific to them.
Oh, just because like I had a saboteur on the ship and I blinded the lookout.
So so that's what it took for us to actually connect to some one of the NPCs that Ted actually made. We're like, what? Like nobody cared about Birdie until Birdie lost their eyes, and also there was like one other one that I liked, with the grumpy Duergar that nobody liked. And my character decided they were going to be best friends.
Yeah, he was kind of amusing, but that was one of those things where like I gave agency, and I think it was you who were like, oh, here's this dude. So initially there were like 10 positions and 30 crew, and just about every episode people were dying from the encounters because none of these were like serious adventurers. They were serious sailors, but that did not mean they had the hit points to survive the things that were being thrown against the ship.
Yeah, so it all created like a very interesting dynamic.
So one of the great things about being stuck on a vessel is that player-to-player interaction, and that kind of like leads us into there are more than one way to kind of get that player-to-player interaction.
Yeah, there's kind of something iconic that seems like a minor thing, but that is a campfire that the players' characters will sit around for, they bed down for the night, and this happens during travel all the time. It's a huge part of it. I know you mentioned this topic because I think you're like reminiscing over maybe games that you've had online where you guys, the players, would interact at these crucial moments where it's kind of downtime in the game, but like the players aren't ready to just move on, and they use this opportunity to role play with each other and not just move the game along.
So awesome D&D players certainly know the power of a good campfire.
All right, Ted, what is the D&D campfire and why should it be used?
The D&D campfire is one of those things that players frequently forget, that we don't live in the moment. We don't live as these characters do. The D&D campfire allows the characters to interact and like share their stresses, their tensions, their hopes, their dreams, the finding out the backstories, all the things that you've come up with as a player that can and should be shared. You're not going to info dump on people. It's not the like, oh, I've got this 4-page backstory, let me read the whole thing to you. But something has recently happened that allows you to be like, I'm going to deliver this prompt, and allow those characters to connect and better know each other and find this similar story, or find the nuances of how these players and characters are going to interact and grow and move and live together. So Dave, why is player-to-player engagement so important to the game?
So the player-to-player engagement is super important because, as we're always kind of mentioning, that you don't want to just info dump on your fellow players. You want to make it a back and forth exchange, and when you're engaging from player to player, it should be a back and forth. It shouldn't be just you kind of monologuing to them. If you're each asking questions about each other's past and history or what your capabilities are, this is a great way to get that out in an organic way.
It's going to allow you to build a bond between, one or more sets of characters. And truthfully, if you're going to be out there adventuring with these fellow characters, you really have to know and trust who they are. And I feel like the more this player-to-player engagement happens, the more of this bond that's going to be built. I always love starting a new campaign, regardless of what the player-to-player reactions are at a table or interactions are at a table. Certain characters are going to, based on how they're role-played and what nuances you have, it's going to determine where the true friendships, where the relationships are going to develop. Sometimes you might find, like, all right, the player might not be, like, super tight. Like, you guys might be friends, but you're not, like, bonded. You're not best friends. But sometimes those characters are going to wind up doing that, and that's going to strengthen your friendship with, the player at the table. So I always enjoy trying to find, like, all right, I want to build a relationship with this character because in real life, I'd like to have a better relationship with this, friend at the table. So these are just fun elements to have that make the campfire that much stronger.
Well, and I would also, just the counterpoint to that is like leave your friendship outside the game just the way it is, but the characters have bonded for whatever reason and in the story. It doesn't have to have a dual meaning,
right?
But it could.
Right. The D&D campfire, it's a, hopefully, an easy thing to pick up on. There's always the bed down for the night, and when we play D&D, there's, we're going to take a long rest. You understand that we don't always mention, we're going to make a campfire and we're going to set out our bedrolls, we're going to eat a meal. So much is just kind of overlooked. And a lot of times that long rest is just kind of hand waved. That's like, it only takes 8 hours. And we just get back into whatever the story is. But those characters, they're living in that moment. It's a scenario where, like, in real life, like, when you bed down for the evening, like at our household, we watch a little bit of TV, we have some conversations. So, like, there's chance to really see, well, what were your thoughts on the day? What are your stressors? What are your issues? Let's talk about some of our problems. So whether you've got the happy-go-lucky bard in the party, whether you've got the charismatic, sorcerer or paladin in the party that's trying to get everybody to, talk and be friends, here's the chance to really open up and allow those characters to explore each other.
Yeah, I mean, the campfire, like you said, is a place for interaction with each of your players, getting to learn about each other. But also, like, you're going to set the watch order when you break camp and set up the fire. You might also delineate, like, who's doing what chores involved. Like you mentioned, it don't just happen. Someone's got to do it. Does the druid just use druidcraft to make everything happen in the campsite? Or does the ranger or barbarian just go about setting everything up, getting the wood for the campfire and things like that? What's the watch order? Like, is it a predetermined thing? You guys always have the same watch order? Or maybe the players, part of like their inter-party banter is fighting over who gets the preferred slots in the watch order. Maybe your group draws lots every night before they've determined the watch, and longest to shortest just gets the their pick of the watch order, right? Could be like a fun mini game inside of D&D that you play. And like Ted said, it's just a chance to sit down with the other players, do some role playing where you're not really being influenced by the adventure that's going on, or maybe that's what you guys want to role play about. Maybe that's what you want to talk about and discuss in game. Maybe you want to come up with your plans, and you guys always do that after you start your camp and set up, and like that's like, okay, what's tomorrow's day? We lay out the plan. Maybe you have like someone who's kind of like take charge and like a strategist. That applies to everything, and like every campfire you set up, that's the next thing they're going to do while you guys are like prepping meals, or after you finish the meal, like they're drawing the X's and the O's in the sand, or whatever you do to kind of enhance your experience at the table.
Like, this is an opportunity for you to get into your character. What is it that you're looking to bring to this group? Are you the fighter? And during today's adventures, like, you realized that there were some tactics that were done poorly, and from a character perspective, like, you could approach it like, look, you realize that you could have stepped behind this tree and gotten some cover, you could have called out and asked for a little bit of support, and I could have like backtracked, and like you could have a little bit of fun, like role-playing some of the aspects of the battle where...
Or it could be like, what was that thing you did? I've never seen you do that before, especially after you've leveled up.
Absolutely, like learning some of the player's new abilities. Or if, like, you're going to level up, like, at this particular long rest, like, you could talk about, like, oh, well, you know, I got this idea of something I'd like to try, and bring it up as, like, as opposed to doing it in battle for the first time. You could just be like, hey, look, I'm thinking about this. What do you guys feel? So whether you're leveling up in the long rest and allow, like, a character-to-character discussion for, like, different things that the player wants to, you know, really take. So that could be a fun nuance to play.
Now, the campfire also has some advantages over other settings, like, say, the tavern, for instance, right? Sure, the tavern's a great place for the players to have inter-party exchanges, but there's also a lot of distractions, like the serving people, the other patrons, the barkeep, performers, so it's really easy.
The table that's really a mimic?
Yeah, the table is really a mimic. So it's really easy for things to pull the players apart and have them not interact with each other, but other things in the world, right? Parties and balls, same problem, a lot going on, but in the middle of the wilderness, and you know, in the dark forest, there's just the campfire and the light surrounding it. It almost creates this like barrier, this little pocket of civilization in the middle of nowhere, where it's just you and your companions, and that's all you really have to interact with.
You know, the only thing that could possibly break that up was those random encounters. In the past, our campfires, we didn't really do a whole lot of character-to-character interaction. It's one of those things that, like, I learned much later in life, as my role-playing life, that character-to-character interaction is one of the things that is, like, an amazing experience and, like, makes you a better role player. But, like, previously it was like, all right, well, our campfire was a requirement to set up of, are we getting a meal? Are we getting a rest? What is our watch order? And it's just waiting for that random encounter that we know is probably going to happen.
There's a couple other things too, right? Like a definite advantage over the tavern that Campfire has is like you want your players to focus on this one NPC. Well, in a tavern, there's all kinds of stuff going on, and maybe they'll focus on that NPC you want them to, or maybe they're gonna focus on Giggles, the throwaway goblin that you made, right? Just as a background detail. But if they're sitting around a campfire and just someone walks into their camp, boom, center of attention. Or they're traveling down the road, it's getting close to time to set camp. There's a campfire up ahead, right? There's already a group of people there or an individual there. It can, like, you can use it as a beacon in the wilderness, but also you can use it as a spotlight that focuses on the thing that you want to be focused on narratively.
It's a really, really great point of, you know, that isolated encounter that is potentially like a diversion or a major plot point. If they've decided to push on and all of a sudden up ahead there is a campfire already set, there's a nice opening that they could all lounge, you know, it gets this, you know, weariness you know, drawn in of like, well, half the work is already done, but is this a trap?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
like you got this.
And you can also like add some other things like, oh, you smell the aroma of roast pheasant or whatever the players might be interested in. And also you might like be a good chance to be like, yo, what are some scents from your homeland that would be really appealing to you? And you can like let the player add that and maybe kind of work that into the encounter as well. Because then they could be like, well, I'm like, as they're approaching, like, oh, you smell the garlic roasted pheasant that's been marinated in honey. It's very specific to this particular, you know, halfling culture or whatever you want to do, and you give that information to the player, and then they might expound upon it or give it to the other players, which then also then creates more inter-party dynamics and them talking about it in a way that like it's just like kind of like a mundane thing, but it can be kind of like a special moment in the game. We're going to look at the 5 best travel spells, but we're going to have a bit more conversation.
All right, so when we're looking at this particular topic, travel spells, sometimes we're talking about movement, things that are going to allow us to travel further, faster, what have you. Other things are travel related spells, things that are going to make a long travel easier on, you know, the party overall. So, you know, it's a broad topic to look at, and there's a whole lot of spells that we feel fit this category, even though when you begin looking at them, they might not feel like they have anything to do with each other.
Yeah, there is, spells that facilitate travel on the small scale, aka the battlefield, and the large scale, the largest scale, traveling between planes, right? And then everything in between. So there's a lot of impact and effects that travel magic can have on the game in, the exploration pillar and the combat pillar. Maybe not so much the social, but it might lead you to some social encounters.
Absolutely. So Dave, what are some game-breaking travel spells that have nothing to do with movement?
So there's a lot of elements to overland travel and travel in fantasy RPGs that generally they're part of the game, they're part of the genre, and they have been since Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, that can just be removed from the game even though you're still traveling. I'm not talking about teleport. I'm talking about things that just create a safe space that the players can put their characters in overnight. Boom, don't even have to keep a watch. There will be no random encounters at night. There are spells like Lehman's Tiny Hut and also the various mansion spells that are just going to be like, yeah, this part of the game is just removed.
It's changed the game in a lot of ways since those spells have become like regularly used, that it's like, all right, this makes things a little bit more streamlined of like, all right, it's a ritual spell, I'll cast this every night, when you get to that third level. And when you get to the higher level, it becomes like, oh, well, what does this experience wind up looking like? Because each unique caster that casts Magnificent Mansion winds up doing something to make it their own space.
So, Ted, do you think powerful spells like teleport, make D&D go faster?
Spells like teleport, they don't necessarily make the game go faster. They make the story potentially go faster, depending upon how the DM, interacts with those particular things. I know that we played a game a while back where you massively leveled up a low-level adventure, and we skipped half the story because it's like, oh, we need to get up there, teleport, and we just moved through the whole mountain range. And Dave's like, okay, he just threw pages to the side. But I don't feel like, if a DM is looking at that and aware that the players have access to such thing, there are ways that you can work that in or work in countermeasures towards that. It's like, okay, well, you bypass this thing here, but you've used that resource, and now you're not going to have that when you go into the next combat. And maybe you couldn't, really use that high-level spell slot to weaken an enemy or what have you. So, everything's a resource. I'm okay with it, even though, yeah, you can bypass a lot of stuff with it.
Yeah, but that can be done for good or ill, right, in the game. So, for instance, like you said, in my game, it just, removed a bunch of encounters, right? Some threats that they're going to have to deal with in that sense. And it made it easier for the characters to get towards their objective. Now, it can make it harder for the DM in the sense where, they have to figure out, oh, what's going to happen now? Maybe they planned on a long travel series of adventures, but now the players have found a way to circumnavigate that and get there faster. So these things can be challenging for a GM, but the other side of that is, I know in the past you've talked about creating games where portals were a thing and a lot of portal travel would happen. So that, if, for instance, some players don't like the focus on that travel aspect of the game, this can get them there really fast, or maybe the GM doesn't like it. Or maybe you just want to be able to go to really different places fast, and the portals are going to allow you to do that. It's not so much about not having, lots of overland travel. It's get to the interesting thing, and then maybe the travel happens before they can go do the objective or get to the next portal or whatever.
Yeah, that was basically the premise of my All-Wizard game. The players would literally get teleported to a space and have a recall stone to come back to their safe location once they've completed their objective. I didn't need to draw the campaign out over, years with having them travel across, vast land masses to explore all these different things. I wanted to get to that chunk of the story. So since they were working with powerful wizards, it's here, off you go.
As we mentioned before, there are travel spells or spells that we're calling travel spells that don't really have anything to do with actual movement. What do we mean by that?
So the concept of these spells that wind up making travel less of a burden when you go out on a long journey in a vast world like D&D, there are going to be monsters, there are going to be threats out there. So things that make it safer for you, Pass Without a Trace, Lehman's Tiny Hut, Magnificent Mansion, these are things that get you away from danger and allow you to kind of keep traveling to a certain degree.
Or what about things that also remove some obstacles, right? There's spells like create food and water, good berry, that like, oh, we don't have to worry about, supplies and food and stuff like that because the mage or the druid can just make it happen. What if you're traveling over a desert, and really the best time to travel is at night because, you don't have the blazing sun. You have to deal with the cold of the desert night, but that might be easier to deal with than the heat. So maybe like a spell like dark vision would be useful for the players that don't have access to it, so everyone can keep moving and not be hindered by not having a light source, and also not making yourself a beacon in the desert.
Or if you're, traveling across the desert, creating water magically so you're not having to carry it is a massive deal, because like, all right, if you're going to travel for weeks across a desert, that's a scenario where like that amount of water is just utterly ridiculous to have. But if you just be like, yeah, I wave my hand and make it happen, it's like I just carry an empty jug and voila, I've cast it, and now problem solved.
Or even things like if you have like an airship campaign going on, having access to an item or the spell Featherfall that allow, like if you go overboard, it activates before you get so far above the ground, so that you don't have to worry about going splat. Now you may have other problems because your airship's all the way up there now, but you're not being dead isn't one of them.
Yeah, that definitely allows travel to keep happening.
All right, Ted, let's talk about our 5 top picks for travel spells.
All right, so these are in no particular order, but first and foremost is going to be Goodberry. It's a low-level spell, and with a single casting, it creates enough nourishment for essentially 10 meals.
For the day.
Yeah. So 10 people can be fully nourished for a day. It's utterly game-breaking when you begin talking about travel, because, let's face it, a single, first-level character, or, a character who has access to a feed to be like, boom, I got this covered. I don't need to go find food. I cast a spell. Everybody, single berry, and that's it. You're good for entire 24 hours of food.
Yeah, and the players can really metagame it too, because the berries last for 24 hours each. They also give you 1 hit point back, so they're going to be like, well, I'm not going to take all my nourishment for today until a crucial moment, like maybe they get dropped to 0, and it has the dual effect of bringing them back up with 1 hit point, and also now they don't need to eat or drink for the day.
Utterly crazy. I think that one, thankfully, is not, anything that I feel it gets overused, but if you're playing a resource-driven game, or you're playing like a survival-style game, that one is becomes boom right to the top of the charts.
Also, it's one of those spells I've seen often cast right before taking the long rest. Be like, yep, I'm just going to have a bunch of berries for the next day.
Indeed.
So next up is the fly spell, and this is more of an intermediate kind of travel spell, because you're not going to go far with it, you're not going to go long distances, but what you might do with it is overcome challenges that come up. Oh, there's a chasm over there. I cast fly. I fly across. Maybe it means you have to, maybe you can't cast it for everyone, but you might get a rope across the chasm so that other players can get it. You can use it to scout out because, maybe the GM describes something up in the distance. A plume of smoke seems to be coming from something burning. One of the characters casts fly, goes over there, comes and checks it out, comes back for scouting. So it can be really crucial, and then it's also, tactically, it's a great spell if you're in combat.
Fly has got lots of different uses. I've seen some, races that get a fly speed, and the vast amount of DM frustrations at that, to me, is like, all right, it's just a thing that's out there. But flight absolutely can be used to accomplish so much that it creates this debate. So that's why it's a 3rd level spell, and comes high on this list.
Next up is Commune with Nature.
Commune with Nature is a really great spell, because you kind of get to commune with nature. You get to ask questions and be able to gather some information. So whether you're getting lore, or whether you're getting things for just your natural survival, this is a way to really be able to aid in your party in so many different ways.
Yeah, you can determine things like bodies of water, buildings and structures, types of creatures. Literally, this is a great spell if you need to find a needle in a haystack. It's going to be able to help players circumnavigate different obstacles without ever getting anywhere near them.
So the next one, we're lumping 2 together, and we've kind of already talked about it. So this is going to be, Liam's Tiny Hut and Magnificent Mansion, because they just lock in the whole, I'm just going to put my feet up and rest, because you just become safe from, any exterior threat.
Yeah, there's not much to say about this one other than it does just create that safe space that the players can go to and not have to worry about random encounters throughout the night. I mean, maybe you can find something, find interesting ways to muck with your players, but you're also going to use them sparingly, or it just seems like sour grapes from the GM if you're doing it every time. I don't really have much to say about this one. It's just pretty straightforward. Rest for 8 hours.
Indeed. Now, with the hut, I've pulled out the Whiz Kids spell effect, and it's tight fitting to put a group of 5 or 6 bodies into that little dome that you get. You can certainly narrate the elements of squishedness, of uncomfortability, the proximity of those who have been adventuring all day. So if you have a character that doesn't like to, shall we say, bathe, it could be possibly problematic. But once you start getting to the level of, Magnificent Mansion, the castings that I've seen, like everybody gets their own room. You get to literally describe everything that's in it. So there it's like, all right, yeah, everybody
There's
gets...
drawn tubs with hot water in them.
Everybody gets their own, tub and room. I mean, my character had their own freaking, forge set up. So it was like, all right, this is just amazing.
Each player's character gets their own unseen servant mystery, so you can have a lot of fun with it.
Indeed. So the last one that we have is going to be what, Dave?
Teleport. Now, we mentioned that earlier, how it can just, work your way around things. We've had players in games set up teleportation circles that they can go back to and use over and over again. And once you start linking them to other teleportation circles, you're just going to get around and you can just remove the overland travel, the sea travel completely.
In my one game, we had we got a helm of teleportation. So this was one of those things. Was like, all right, we're certainly paying attention to where we've been, and we've used it to great effect. But just because you've got the ability to move around does not necessarily mean that it's going to solve all of your problems. A good thinking DM is aware of what their players' abilities are and works with that within the story. So players are always going to be able to be challenged, whether you're looking to, travel or not.
So we've talked about spells, we've talked about magic, we've talked about different types of travel, different places. We've even mentioned base travel and Spelljammer and everything else. But what we haven't talked about is mounts, and we're going to move into that segue, but it's not any old mounts. We're going to get really specific with the type of mounts we're talking about here.
When we're talking about mounts, there's nothing that I feel is as grandiose as the most spectacular possible mount that you could have in D&D, and that's going to be a full-on dragon. I mean, it's right there in the title, Dungeons & Dragons, so who doesn't want to have a dragon as a mount, right?
In first edition and second edition, there were rules for subduing a dragon in order to basically do that, make them your companion, make them your mount. It was ridiculous. Those rules don't exist anymore, thankfully.
So first and foremost, I want to thank WizKids for sending us these amazing minis. At this point in time, 2 of these dragons have actually already traveled with me across the pond. Both of these guys here were used in my D&D in a Castle game to, immense and glorious effect. So it was definitely a lot of fun.
So Ted, you just mentioned you had brought some of these dragons with you to D&D in a Castle. Let me pose the question, Ted. How do you use dragon riders in your D&D game?
So in order to use Dragon Riders in your game, they make fantastic BBEGs, someone that's there to, threaten and harass throughout the whole game, or just totally shock and awe for a single encounter.
Which you've made great use of at D&D in a Castle, because your whole game was based around Dragon Riders.
Indeed. My game was inspired by How to Train Your Dragon. Each character got essentially a riding drake mount. I'm actually in the process of writing up the process and the stat block that I used that was each character could customize. It's going to be something that's going to go up on the website. But this guy right here, Consaldi, was used as the mount for essentially an anti-paladin or a paladin-like character that harassed them, throughout. And it was you would mention this character, and if he showed up, it's dude, you should run. This guy's a terror. So it was a little bit of fear. And when he finally was there for the final battle, they're I don't know what I should do here. So some of them were a little trepidatious about engaging, where others are all right, I got to do the main objective, which was actually to fight this guy to force the spirit back into, the body of a gold dragon. So Dave, given, Dragon's amazing abilities, do you feel that using dragon minis is useless in a game like D&D?
It is really tough, especially when you look at the fact that when you get these larger, gorgeous sculptures, they can be quite pricey. So using them in your D&D game might be hard. But if you're a collector, they're worth having as a collector. Maybe you put them out as set pieces. They're fantastic and big enough to do that with. But also there are other ways to introduce dragons in your games other than just threats. You can introduce them as rivals or NPC rivals that aren't really there to physically combat the players, but maybe thwart them in other ways. And, there's this banter back and forth. And also the players, hopefully, especially at low levels, aren't just going to try and attack this particular NPC, and they're going to have to just deal with them. So they can be interesting set pieces more so than combat encounters.
I did exactly that at my castle game. Didn't have it for this video. He's over there at the moment, but my gold dragon that I used, that's up in this beautiful glorious pose, like that was there like for session 1, encounter 1, started off players in front of this amazing dragon, just a show of like, oh, this is who your friend is at the moment. And then throughout the course of the game, that dragon wound up getting weaker and corrupted and turned into this beautiful monstrosity here that they then had to try and save. So it was an amazing experience to see something so glorious to become turned into something so evil.
So you've already kind of mentioned the dragons, but more specifically, let's kind of like zoom in, spotlight on each one. We'll talk about them, as we introduce them and how cool they look, and then we'll talk about possible uses for in your D&D games.
All right. So to start off first, we get Lord Soth and the Death Dragon. These are absolutely fantastic minis. I mean, Lord Soth is famous throughout multiple planes of existence at this point in time, and to make him more terrifying, to put him on a Death Dragon, utterly ridiculous. The second character is Kinsaldi, and his red dragon, as I said, like this red dragon is what I had used at D&D in a castle as like the mount for my anti-paladin. So he's absolutely badass. He comes with some armor, and with each of these minis, they have a section that can be removed from the dragon, and they can be taken off of their midsection so that they are legitimately mounted on the dragon, which is a somewhat newer development with these minis. So I absolutely adore that aspect.
Yeah, because it gives you the ability to show them mounted and dismounted, which is super cool.
Right, and for so if you just want to use the dragon, you don't have to worry about like, whoa, why does it have a saddle on it? Which is like my main problem with Aviatris, is like, what if I don't want a skeleton on the back of my white dragon? Like, and then this is Red Ruin and the Red Dragon L. So like they make an awesome pair with this gorgeously long spear, and he's got armor all the way down its back. So it's a pretty amazing piece here as well.
Yeah, WizKids did a fantastic job with these sculpts. They're gorgeous. They look really well. And you are finally getting dragons that are sized appropriately for the dragons and the threats. You put them on the table, and the player's like, oh my gosh. The nice thing about them being able to be mounted or not mounted is depending on the situation, because not every GM only uses minis for combat. Some of them like to set the scenes and put them out as they're narrating, and that creates more of an immersive experience for that particular table. We tend to just break it out for combat more so than like, oh, here's a cool set piece and we're just going to talk.
But when you have it, you have that option. And when you look at the versatility of being able to have this characters mounted or not mounted, it turns a very small bit of plastic into multiple options there. I would love to see them get to a point where they could literally have a generic mount piece and each character could be mounted anywhere, which may come at some point in time in the future, but for now I'll take the versatility option that I got.
Well, I mean, imagine putting out the Lord Soth mini and being like, oh, that's scary, right? And the players are like, that's scary, but I think we can take Lord Soth. And then out of the shadows comes this death dragon to hover over top of him. And then and when Swift move, he mounts it, right? And now he's on the dragon. And you're able to visually and physically represent that. I think it could make for some cool moments at the table. So let's talk about using these gorgeous minis in your game?
All in all, these are characters that exist within Dragonlance. They're tied to the Dragonlance setting and adventure book, so like you can use them straight out of the Dragonlance books in the encounters and adventures that are already written. But if you're looking to step into your own world, you can take any of these characters that are in mini standpoint and be able to create an whole cloth how you want to use them, how they're going to fit into your narration, your story, your setting.
Yeah, you could use them. They just look the way they look, but their stories and backgrounds are completely different. Maybe you're using the Lord Soth mini, but he's representing a different Death Knight in your world and his dragon in your world. Or maybe you just want to rip the lore from some of these particular characters right out of Dragonlance and put them right in your own worlds. You can introduce them early on and have role-playing encounters with them. You can introduce them as, oh, this is way more powerful than you're going to be able to take. I do like the fact that the riders come off and go back on the dragons, because say you need a dragon and this dragon's perfect, but like Ted had mentioned earlier, you have that white dragon, but it has the mini on it that you don't want to use. So it's so much cooler to be able to take Lord Soth off and be like, oh, look at this awesome death dragon that has just appeared, as opposed to, look at this awesome white dragon that appeared. Oh, ignore the skeleton on its back. That's nothing.
So in my my game that I ran at the castle, the gold dragon had gifted mounts to one set of peoples, the tribe of Kyokolo, but to the paladins group did not offer the same. So he got angry at it. So he went and basically tamed a red dragon, tame as much as you can really tame, and out of anger and what have you, he decided he was going to take vengeance on this gold dragon, and that was the plot that the characters were enveloping and trying to solve. So like he was so mad at this gold dragon that it's like, you know what? I'm gonna curse you, I'm gonna corrupt you, and then you're gonna be my slave. And the players are only just barely in time were able to save this dragon. So like that's how I used these two specific minis in my game.
Well, not only that, your whole game, the premise was I trained my dragon, and so it's all about riding dragons, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Now this one here, I've got the box off to the side, so it will count as as previously used, but we're gonna add the red dragonelle onto our giveaway shelf to give away to one of our lucky fans in one of our monthly giveaways.
Very cool, very cool. So there are just some ways to use these awesome dragon minis in your game that makes them not useless. Just remember, you don't have to wait till the players are high enough level. Imagine putting out that huge gold dragon and then putting the minis out for the players, and they're like, oh my god, what's going on? And you don't have to signal it's a role-playing encounter. Let them figure it out. Let them go, all right, can we talk our way out of becoming Scooby Snacks for a dragon? All right, so moving on to our next topic, not only are we going to talk about travel, but we're going to travel away from D&D and go specifically to other role-playing games. In this case, we're going to talk about one of the role-playing games we're working on, Zoo Mafia, and how using travel in that game works, which is very different than how it works in your typical fantasy D&D, Lord of the Rings style game, where you're talking about these epic journeys from across the continent or maybe even to other worlds. Zoo Mafia kind of has a much smaller scope and zoomed in look, but that doesn't mean travel isn't important to other games like that.
A zoomed in?
Yeah, zoomed in. And then
you do this part, I'll do this part.
Yeah. Today on What is Nerdarchy Working On?
We're talking about Zoo Mafia and leaving the zoo. This might be some of these viewers' first time hearing about Zoo Mafia, so let's do it short and sweet. What is Zoo Mafia?
All right, Zoo Mafia is a game about going wild, doing crime, but don't let the humans catch you. You're playing a zoo animal during Prohibition with the Secret Life of Pets style game or Zookeeper, where the animals are actually more aware. They speak to each other. They have their own secret lives at nights when the zookeepers go home, and a certain portion of these zoo animals are actually criminals. There are 3 crime families in the zoo. You are playing and part of a gang, a mob that is trying to get made into one of these mafias, which may sometimes cause you to have to leave the zoo in order to get that recognition of the crime bosses.
All right, so what is the significance of the zoo in Zoo Mafia, Dave?
Well, so Zoo Mafia is really about a mob war, right? And you trying to get in on what you believe will be the winning side. Maybe you're the one that turns the tide, right?
Sure.
And creates the winning side, or maybe you create your own side. But the zoo breaks down into these little fiefdoms of crime lords and different crimes, different organizations. In our own games, we've used the 3 main crime bosses, but we've also introduced smaller crime families or organizations into the particular zoo. You want to use the zoo to highlight these different territories, these different crime bosses, how they might be different, but also to contrast the criminal elements of the zoo with the civilian population of the zoo. And it's definitely, things that we've introduced where this area is a night market and it's just for the regular people. In the zoo, you have speakeasies. Some of them are neutral, but many of them are owned by the different crime bosses. And, it gives you a place to kind of highlight what those criminals are going to be like, what those animals are like, in an environment where it might not automatically break out into gang violence.
And the great part about this is you've got these 3 zoo mafias, and the zoo is too small for 3 mafias competing over the space. So the concept is one of them has got to go. So over the course of a campaign, that is kind of like the expected play or the expected outcome of engineering the downfall of one of them. Whether you try to usurp control and bring them in, whether you try to eliminate them, whether you try to get the boss booted out of the zoo, or whatever have you. There's all different kinds of ways to like seek a balance, with this kind of style campaign. So the zoo becomes this non-character character, because if all 3 mafias are left intact, it's going to tear the zoo apart. And then the humans are going to know about this secret world that the animals have, and that's no good. That's worse than, the deaths that would wind up happening. All right, so Dave, in Zoo Mafia, why is it so important to then leave the zoo?
Well, in Zoo Mafia, sometimes there's missions that you just can't undertake inside the zoo. In one particular episode that we ran on the channel, matter of fact, you can go check out the different playlists that we have for Zoo Mafia and watch our sessions or the design diaries. But essentially, they had to leave the zoo to find a stool pigeon and bring them back. In this case, I believe it was an inchworm that was able to sneak out of the zoo in an apple that ended up in a teacher's desk. Right, in an elementary school. So they had to interact with the pets that were already in the school, which of course had their own crime family in there, of course, and bring back that worm in order to deliver it to your crime boss, because it had some dirt on that particular crime boss, and they did not want it to be handed over to the Claw Patrol. But I got a question for you, Ted. Why would the characters want to leave the zoo in Zoo Mafia or not leave the zoo in Zoo Mafia?
So this is a really great character development aspect. Sometimes characters might want to leave the zoo in Zoo Mafia because their life is here, so getting out is a sense of freedom. But you could also have that kind of syndrome where now this is where life is, so leaving the zoo opens it up to too many freedoms, to too many things, and those choices could become more than you can deal with. So it's nah, man, I don't want to leave. Everything's here. It's comfortable here. I get everything I need. There's no need to go out there.
Also, it just increases your odds of being discovered by humans, right?
That is indeed.
In the game, there's severe mechanical consequences if you have an interaction with humans that isn't related to being an animal, but being part of a mafia or doing non-animal things. Mechanically, that can cut one of your resources right in half.
Yeah, it's really deadly, really dangerous, to do that and to willfully make that choice. It's the story has to be massive for that choice to be made, because it can go south real quick for your character. So you got to be careful with that one.
But along those veins, sometimes it's just really important for your characters to leave the zoo. And in the one instance, the crime family you're trying to get into, that animal, that worm, had dirt on Carlo Hambino. So you guys had to get out there and get that worm back in before they could cause problems for the crime family you're trying to get into.
There's always something out there that the zoo doesn't have. So acquiring of resources or information, or to stop, in this case, information from getting out, it's pivotal. But just like any role-playing game, you're always going to need new areas to explore. No matter how big your zoo is, there's always something that isn't in the zoo. So it's something new to go look at, whether you want to go to the convenience store to pick up something, whether you want to go to the pet store to pick up something, whether you're looking to recruit other animals into your cause. There's always another thing that you could wind up, getting, doing, finding that is outside the zoo. And since, these are not just regular animals, they're not powered, but they're human level intelligence, human level interacting with things. There is the blanket of, you guys know how to get out of the zoo if need be, just like you know how to get out of your enclosures. The people think they're smart, but they're not. The animals are smarter than them because they know how to do all of these things when the people don't think they can. So those are just some of the ways that you can kind of benefit from exploring outside of your standard, locales, if you will. And whether you're talking about, Zoo Mafia or any other role-playing game that you're used to having a confined space, like if you're used to running an urban adventure and now all of a sudden you need to get into a straight-up dungeon crawl or, wilderness exploration, it breaks the monotony. So that's the concept, to get out of your safe zone or out of your comfort zone and into something a little bit new, a little bit more risky for this, particular set of characters. If you like this video, as well as all the content we put out on nerdarchy.com, make sure you like, share, subscribe, even attune to that notification bell.
Quick reminder, we drop new videos here on the channel weekly, so come on back, but you can't wait till then. Check the cards up here for your next Nerdarchy video.
So until next time, stay nerdy.